That's right.
Some similarities between all of them. As we mentioned earlier, none of them are currently a sitting MPP. Three of them, Mulroney, Elliott, and Ford, have all had family members that held high elected office. We've learned that all of them oppose the carbon tax, oppose the cap and trade system that the Ontario government has put in place, and don't necessarily support what the People's Guarantee said they would do, and we'll talk about that in just a second. They're also, it's a GTA-heavy field, isn't it?
Very much so. Although, as we've discussed before, we also assume that the GTA will really be the deciding ground within the context of this election on June 7th, so perhaps that's not so surprising.
Typically in Ontario leaderships, we might have somebody from the GTA, we might have a candidate from southwestern Ontario, maybe one from the east, possibly someone from the north, but it's a pretty GTA heavy field.
So much so that Tanya Granick-Allen and Christine Elliott are actually looking at potentially running in the same riding. So
well, that would be fun.
That would be an interesting contest, yes.
So that takes us to how and where are they different? So Caroline Mulroney, was actually nominated as the PC candidate in York Simcoe prior to the Patrick Brown resignation. So as she pointed out during the debate yesterday, she was the only one that was committed to running for the party before all of these problems started. Doug Ford is not nominated, but he's indicated that if he intends to seek the PC nomination in Etobicoke North, which is kind of the Ford part of the city. I looked in the 2014 mayoralty. He won both wards that make up Etobicoke North by 70 and by 67%. So I think he feels pretty comfortable there. Riding currently held by Liberal Shafiq Qadri. Christine Elliott indicated that she's looking for a riding. I think Tanya Granick-Allen is also looking for a riding, and as Brian pointed out, wouldn't it be weird if they both sought the nomination against each other? So that's where we're at. I think Ford, it's safe to say, launched his leadership with an anti-establishment, anti-elite. Make no mistake about it, the elites in this party don't want me to run. And by the way, we've extended an invitation to Doug Ford to be our guest next week, and we have a tentative acceptance. Apparently he's going to be here for this show next Friday, so we'll get to ask him a lot of these questions, and he'll have an opportunity to answer unfiltered directly to the people watching on all of these questions. I think Elliott hit the ground running as experienced, ready, done it before. And
Mulroney, fresh face, energized, people want to change.
Generational change, I think I saw one of her supporters say, and the fourth candidate, Mrs. Granick-Allen, seems to be very concerned about the role of parents in education, seems to be concerned about the sex ed curriculum, and
grassroots.
Pretty clear about that during yesterday's debate. So what else came out in the debate? So we know that none of them like the carbon tax. On the minimum wage, I think that three of them, Elliott, Ford, and Granick-Allen, all said at $14, it stays at $14. Caroline Mulroney adopted the People's Guarantee position that she would allow it to increase by 25 cents per hour each year. So that second dollar, that $15 an hour that right now the Wynne government has coming into effect January 1st, 2019, would actually take 4 years to come
get there.
into effect. None of them, three of them seem to be pretty consistent on the curriculum. Doug Ford saying the curriculum shouldn't be there to teach what he calls liberal ideology. I think Mrs. Granick-Allen is pretty clear on where she's at with it.
She seemed fairly focused on anal sex, particularly. That came up a few times, but
that's not one we've heard often in leadership debates in the past. And we do, however, have Caroline Mulroney saying that she would not reopen the curriculum. She would leave it alone.
She did agree with the other candidates that it was brought in without sufficient consultation with parents, but she also has acknowledged that it is in place and that she would be leaving it in place.
Yeah, and I mean, we will have somebody from the Liberal side on the show too, but this notion that the government doesn't consult, I mean, you put something out to our clients a week and a half ago. I think you had 29 active consultations that are posted to the regulatory registry, aside from the usual stakeholder ministry work that goes on all the time. So I don't know the extent of it. I mean, if you consult and you don't take the advice of those that maybe step forward, that doesn't mean you didn't consult.
That's true. I mean, I think one of, and Stephen Paikin was quite good at trying to point this part out as well, to sort of call people on that. But perhaps maybe it's the feeling of whether or not they've been adequately consulted, maybe whether or not they were heard, or that were they just going through the motions. And that's certainly a sentiment we've heard sometimes from some of our clients. So maybe that's more what they were getting at, but certainly the consultation piece was one that came up a lot during the debate.
Well, certainly, I mean, it's a big part of what we do here when we take our clients to consult or talk to government and participate in those processes. However, it's not, look, on the development of the curriculum, it's not something that I personally was involved in, but we'll have somebody from the Liberal side that can speak to that and the extent of those consultations. So the carbon tax, the minimum wage, the curriculum, Patrick Brown, whether you like him or not, had done a reasonably good job of kind of putting those socially divisive issues off to the side. Now they're back front and center. They're being talked about at debates. So that takes us to the future of the People's Guarantee.
Well, and you know, we had commented before about this, that for those who maybe aren't following this quite as closely, when the People's Guarantee came out, many commentators said that it could have been written by a Liberal. And I think more of the moderate centrist voters said that approvingly, and more of the social conservatives said that disparagingly.
So when asked by Paikin on the debate, so Granite Allen was pretty clear. Patrick Brown is out, the People's Guarantee is dead.
Yeah.
It died when he died. It's a pretty strong statement. I think that Ford came out and he said, I'm not a believer in the 90-page People's Magazine. So I don't think it has a bright future if Ford becomes a leader. There won't be a lot of time for the development of a new platform. I think that of the four, probably Mulroney was the one that adhered to the most, which is not to say she endorses everything in that platform, but she seemed to be the most consistent with it. And Elliott seemed to be, well, I don't love this curriculum. I think we need to revisit it. She didn't say she'd scrap it necessarily. So we're not really sure what the future is of the PC platform. Now, you notice too that none of the candidates went out of their way to attack one another. It's a preferential ballot. So the PC party has a one member, one ballot, one member, one vote balloting system. So unlike other conventions where delegates are elected to represent ridings, so you might have 12 delegates from 100 ridings and ex officios and people of status, in this party, every member gets to vote. And it's a preferential ballot system. Although you vote once, you will be asked, who's your first choice for leader? Who's your second choice for leader? Who's your third choice for leader? And all of these candidates know that. So there's nothing to be gained really by sitting around a table like this and attacking the candidate to your left or to your right, because you're thinking, well, if this person drops off the ballot, I want his or her supporters to come to me. So we noticed maybe a little extra civility in the debate yesterday.
I would say so. They were all, there was also a lot of agreement, generally speaking, as you noted, in carbon tax, minimum wage, sex ed. You know, there were some degrees of difference, perhaps, but most were on the same page.
Yeah, and it seemed to me, I know some of the columnists expressed disappointment as to the depth and the quality of the policy debate. You know, we do a lot of healthcare work here. I was happy to hear Christine Elliott at least talk a little bit about healthcare ideas that might take effect if she becomes the leader of the party. But, you know, it kind of reminded me at a point where in David Miller's first mayoralty campaign in Toronto, there was a group of candidates, I think there were 7 of them, that operated as a pack. And back then the election was in November. And so if we saw one of the candidates at the food bank, we saw all of them. And if we saw one candidate scrubbing graffiti off of an overpass, these are real examples, this stuff happened, they were all there, and with the media in tow. And then Miller, who really was not leading, he wasn't a front runner, latched onto this island airport issue and ran with it, separated himself from the pack. So I'm wondering, I don't know what that issue might be, but should we expect that one of these candidates will latch onto something, separate themselves from the others, and use it as a path to victory?
For sure. I think Doug Ford perhaps thought the carbon tax was going to be a way that he'd be able to do that, and then of course we're now seeing that everyone agreed with him on that front.
Yeah, it's a little actually disappointing if you're into political drama that all of these people are kind of in the same place. Now, preferential ballot. We've seen at the election of federal Conservative leader Andrew Scheer. He wasn't first at the beginning, but he was first at the end. Kathleen Wynne was not first on the first ballot, but she was first when it mattered at the end. Even Dalton McGuinty, back in a delegated convention, was fourth and ended up winning the thing. So there is some benefit to being people's second choice in these things. Very quickly, some points of interest. Doug Ford said he would end the taxpayer subsidy to political parties. We're going to ask him when he comes here whether or not that means he would allow the limits, which is now $1,200, to increase, given that political parties, look, they're an important part of our democracy, and people may be okay with using some taxpayer money to keep those parties in business. But we'll ask him about that. Amazing, Carolyn Mulroney raised $486,000 in 9 days.
I certainly couldn't do that.
No, in an era where you can't raise corporate money, you can't raise union money, you can't raise association money, it's personal checks, and nobody can give you more than $1,200. She raised $486,000 in 9 days. That's
hundreds and hundreds of people.
Remarkable. Last thing I wanted to touch on in Ford is he ran for mayor 2014. Now, Toronto, really since the Mike Harris days, has elected Liberals federally and provincially for the most part. Doug Ford got 331,000 votes when he ran for mayor in 2014. He won 20 of 44 wards. He won wards where they only elect Liberals federally and provincially. Is this the opening that the PC party needs to crack Liberal Fortress Toronto?
I don't know about that part, because it looked like they were doing pretty well in starting to crack Fortress Toronto, even as things were trending, and we'll get to that in just a second with the Forum poll that came in recently. But Doug Ford, at the start of the debate last night, he commented about the fact that not only does he attract support from Conservatives, he also attracts support from NDP voters and also from Liberal voters, and that absolutely is true. A lot of people who aren't traditionally PC supporters are amazingly Ford supporters. And that really changes a lot of the dynamics and a lot of the calculations that we've seen with this, in both positive and negative ways, I will note.
Now, coming out of the debate last night, I had the chance to talk to a number of Liberals, and even this morning, and they're actually, they're not discouraged by what they saw yesterday in the PC leaders debate. The feeling amongst most Liberals is that Kathleen Wynne in a debate with Andrea Horwath, the NDP leader, and any one of those PC candidates, that Wynne would do quite well. I'm also reminded that in the last two elections, the Liberals trailed in the polls in the lead up, this period, comparable period, and ended up winning them. And I am reminded that Kathleen Wynne is a pretty good campaigner.